There's no other commissioner here. Give me that one. That works now. Good evening, everyone. The August 14th, 2024 regular meeting of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability is called to order at 6:35 p.m. We'll begin by calling the roll to establish a quorum. Commissioner Gottlieb. Present. Commissioner Driver is present. Commissioner Terry. Commissioner Minor. Commissioner Presley. Commissioner Wortham. With 5 out of 6 members of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability present, we have a quorum and we can conduct the commission's business. The next item of business, I thought I just saw her with more of these. Can you select 10? Thank you. The next item of business is public comment. If you would like to share something related to the commission's work on public safety and accountability, you have a few options. You can speak at a public meeting. You can also submit public comment in writing by emailing your comment to communitycommissionpubliccomment@cityofchicago.org, or you can bring a copy of your comment to one of the commission's public meetings and give it to someone on the commission or someone on the commission staff. People who wanted to speak during the public comment period tonight were asked to submit their names in writing earlier. Names were then drawn at random by a member of the commission staff. Speakers will be called in the order in which their names are drawn. If your name is called to offer public comment, we ask that you approach the microphone and line up in the order in which your name is called. When it's your turn to speak, please say your name and then spell your name and then offer your comments. We have allotted a total of 20 minutes of public comment. Okay. For the purposes of quorum, Commissioner Minor is now present, and all 6 members of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability are here. Our first speaker, I'm going to call you in groups of 3, so you can line up at the microphone. Our first speaker is Shayla Spearman, followed by Kamaria Powell. Followed by Willie Griffin. You can begin.
Hello, my name is Shayla Spearman. I am a S-H-A-Y-L-A, Spearman, S-P-E-A-R-M-A-N. I'm a peacekeeper with Giving Others Dreams located on the southeast side of Chicago. We are in need of an Office of Gun Violence Reduction, a central place solely to focus on the why and how to reduce the and or stop the daily use of gun violence and the mental impact that it's having on our community on a daily basis. Gun violence has a detrimental effect over everyone around those that are directly and indirectly affected by it. Having our children unable to play outside because of fear of gun violence is a sad reality that we live in today. And again, I say in the beginning, we need an Office of Gun Violence and Reduction in the city of Chicago. Give our future a chance to grow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Kamaria Powell. I spell my name K-A-M-A-R-I-A, Powell, P-O-W-E-L-L. I just had a comment. The Office of Gun Violence Reduction. I want to know, how will they work with Public Health's Office of Violence Prevention? Because that's a unit within the Bureau of Behavioral Health, and they fund a lot of non-profit violence reduction programs, and I want to know if there will be some sort of collaboration between the two, so it won't be a duplication or one unit is in silo doing one thing without speaking to the other. I just want to know how that will work together. Okay.
Thank you. Next.
Good evening. My name is Willie Griffin, and I'm a proud member of an organization called Giving Others Dreams. We are peacekeepers. Our mission and role in gun violence prevention and reduction is to create a safe environment in our community by canvassing the neighborhood, pushing for peace, de-escalating situations that might escalate into gun violence or any violence for that matter. Also, by providing our young adults with opportunities, resources such as GED programs, counseling for victims and family members of gun violence, and mental health awareness, just to name a few. That's why it is important to me as an advocate for this gun violence prevention and reduction office, a specific place to collaborate with others and put together and strategize strategic plans in attempt to prevent gun violence in our communities in the city of Chicago. Thank you.
So before, can you all hear me? I want to clarify something before we continue with public comment. So the CCPSA was petitioned to have a hearing on establishing an Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the city of Chicago. We formally accepted that hearing and scheduled it for today. However, by city ordinance, every month we have to have a regularly scheduled meeting. This is currently the regularly scheduled meeting. So we will start the meeting as we have, get through public comment. We will then take one vote. We will then adjourn that meeting, and then the hearing will be immediately following this. So I just don't want anybody to be confused when we adjourn this meeting, as we're satisfying our requirements on the ordinance, and then the hearing will be immediately following this meeting. There is somebody who wrote a name for a public comment. It looks like it begins with a FAJ. I'm not able to read your name, but if you would like to come up and offer your comments. Otherwise, the other two speakers are CC Colon and Cheryl Miles.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon. My name is Celia Colon. I am CEO and president of Giving Others Dreams. I'm short, so I'm gonna take the mic down. I'm also a gun violence survivor. I lost my little sister 3 years ago. One of the things that I'm pushing for is a policy, a trauma-informed policy at every funeral home and at every medical examiner's office. As a gun violence survivor, it should be our choice. If we want to go identify our people at the medical examiner's office, it should not be forced on us. We are given trauma that is soul shaking and shattering. I had to identify my sister on her birthday with a 45 to her head. There's no therapy that can help me with that. And then when the funeral was over, I was given a box with no name, no label. And when I opened it at home, it was my sister's crime scene clothes, still moist and bloody, with pieces of her brain, is all I can say, because she was shot in the head, attached to her clothes. Shouldn't nobody ever have to go through something like that ever in life? There's no therapy for stuff like that. I now do violence intervention and prevention work in her honor, because I don't believe any of us were born to kill each other. I believe violence is learned and can be unlearned. And because all of them are amazing peacekeepers that are on the grounds, frontline workers, they should be supported with active life-saving tools. They don't have the tools. Just last week, a couple of our peacekeepers had to be the people between life and death for 2 young people that were shot on 81st and Commercial. They were the ones that applied first aid and held down their wounds. Even when 20 police showed up and none of them used their stop the bleed kits, our people should have the stop the bleed kits and tourniquets. We should have an emergency box, just like they have emergency boxes for people to do harm reduction with drugs. They got the clean box and the needles that could be replaced. We need them. We need the emergency blue boxes to call the police that really care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, how y'all doing? My name is Zakia Leach, that's spelled Z-A-K-I-A, last name Leach, L-E-A-C-H. I'm a peer support advocate for GOD, and I am a gun violence victim. I advocate for us to have a gun reduction office because I'm tired of my friends being shot down. I had a friend who was just killed. His name's Todd Brown. He was killed on 71st and Jeffrey. He was shot 27 times by an assailant who was not even masked. Long live him. I had another friend. Oh, Jesus help me. Last month, his name's Milton Coleman. He was assassinated at a park on 67th and Jeffrey. This is why we need those, because these people used assault rifles on my friends. Is that not an overkill? Is that not okay for my kids and my nieces and my mother to walk through the neighborhood and she's susceptible to being shot 27 times by somebody that she does not even know? The children cannot play. We need you guys to put that here so that we don't be afraid for our lives. I'm terrified every day I get on the train. Every day I come from wherever I'm coming from to go to work. It's ridiculous and it's redundant. It is something that we can do something about. It is more power in numbers than it is with us just standing here and just waving our hands and looking for tourniquets. It is a necessity. It is a requirement. It is needed in our communities. If you live here, you work here, you prosper here, we need help. We're asking for help. Thank you.
Our next three speakers are Monica Grant, Eddie Johnson, and Beth Rockford. And the last speaker will be Kirk Fleming.
My name is Monica Gant. It is spelled Monicagant. And I am here as a USA citizen and a resident of Chicago, Illinois. And I pose a question. We need to clean the system up. If we don't clean the system up, things won't change. I did not mean to be so harsh, but I am here on the behalf of my father, El Rayo, God. And he is saying, save my people. And he has told me how you make change is you clean the system up. If the same police people that are in place, in high places, are still there, nothing will change. That's how you change a business. Every business does inventory. So we need to do an inventory. And we can be the first city, Chicago, to do it, an inventory on all who are in charge or in power of our people. So if we do that, I promise you, and get good people, it'll change.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sandra Cooks. I'm a member of GOD, Giving Others Dreams. I'm a lead, and I'm calling because I feel that I'm piggybacking off everything everyone else said. We do need this in our area because I am the one that saved the little boys' lives on 81st in Exchange. It was horrible that we had to pull ourselves together, forget everything that was going on around us and just focus on them babies for 20, 25 minutes until not the paramedics, not the fire department, but the police came. The what you call the things that they, the things, the little things that they had on, the cameras, no cameras on, expecting the worst, and didn't help, apply nothing. We did it all by ourselves. So with that being said, I feel it's very important that we have that and all resources that we need in our communities to provide and help make things better. I'm from that southeast side of Chicago. We love on each other there. We trying to make our society and our community better. And we just need the resources.
Hello, Elizabeth, traditional spelling, Rochford, Rochford, 17th District Counselor. I and my community want to thank you for the statement that was made at the last meeting about working with the mayor's office to rid out oath keepers and other bias-based police officers. And I have also been asked by my constituents to ask you to please report monthly on how that process is going. We're a little bit concerned that we don't know what it means to work with the mayor's office on a task force that like that. And so we're hoping that monthly at your meetings, you can give us an update of how that process is going and what that looks like. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Eddie Johnson. I'm the former superintendent of Chicago Police Department. Thank you all. Thank you. So I want to thank you all for your service. But listen, when we talk about establishing an Office of Gun Reduction, gun violence reduction in this city, I think that's a great thing. But I think it's also important to think about what that actually means and what it takes to get us there. If we're going to do that, we have to understand that these people in this auditorium know and feel what that gun violence is when they see people they know and their loved ones getting shot and killed every day in this city. People of color, they wouldn't be here if they didn't understand that. I understand that. Being a cop for 31 years, but also lived in Chicago my entire life. My family's been the victim of gun violence. So if we're gonna do this, we need to do it correctly. One of the ways that we do that is ensuring that we get the proper data from the police department and from the city that shows us where these things are occurring and what we can do to prevent them. Everything this city has to bring to bear to stop gun violence in this city, we should be willing to do it. Everybody in this auditorium deserves to feel safe and to be safe. And the only way to do it is to understand we as a city have to do everything we can to keep technologies in this city, more police officers, community members, clergy, businesses. We all have to work together to do this. It's just mind-boggling to me, a technology like ShotSpotter, we're about to lose. If we lose that, do we not understand 70 to 80% of the gunshot calls in this city go unreported in these challenged areas? What we're going to see is we're going to mistakenly think gun violence is going down. No, it's not going to go down. It's going to go up. We're going to think it's going down because it's going to be underreported. So these people deserve everything we can do to keep them safe and our city safe. Thank you all.
How you doing? My name is Kirk Fleming. It's K-I-R-K, 2 K's, no T. Last name Fleming, 1 M, F-L-E-M-I-N-G. I'm here as a committed advocate of the non-for-profit organization, Giving Others Dreams. I'm also a former problem that became a solution. I'm here today to say, yes, we do need that office here for violence reduction, gun reduction. In the city of Chicago, having an office dedicated to reducing gun violence is not only crucial, but also life-saving. This office could consolidate efforts, propose new strategies, and facilitate a unified approach. It will enable us to address the roots of gun violence, which often go beyond accessibility to firearms and dives into social issues such as alcohol misuse, education, and poverty. I stand here today, once again, telling you that I was the problem. I have a background of UUWs. The solution for me was given opportunities, okay? The more opportunities I was presented with, the more opportunities I was faced with, the less violence I thought about, the more I thought I could do better for myself. I then had children and wanted to do better for them. If you want us to give up something, you have to give us something. We need more opportunities. We need more resources. $2 billion went to a quantum building on the east side. Ask Mayor Brandon about that $2 billion.
We have reached the end of our public comment period. Thank you again to all of our speakers. We value your input. Our next order of business will be reports and updates. We will begin with motions to fill a vacancy in the 6th District Council. Under state law, when there is a vacancy in an elected position in Chicago, the mayor has the power to fill the vacancy. But under city ordinance, when there's a vacancy for an elected district council position, the district council and the commission also play a role in filling the vacancy. Under Chicago Municipal Code, Section 2-80-070, when there is a vacancy in a district council, the existing members of that district council have 30 days to nominate 3 candidates for the vacancy of that commission. The commission then has a total of 60 days from the creation of the vacancy to select one of these candidates to recommend to the mayor for appointment to the district council. Then the mayor chooses someone to fill the vacancy. I will begin by discussing our recommendation to fill the 6th District Council. Pursuant to the law I described, the remaining members of each of the 2 district councils held an application process and interviews for candidates to fill the vacancy. The remaining councils worked diligently to ensure wide promotion of the application opportunity and a careful process for reviewing qualified candidates. The commission thanks the remaining members of the district council for their hard work in raising awareness about the vacancy and vetting candidates to join their respective councils to serve their district. After completing their review of qualified applicants, the remaining councilors of each of the 2 councils voted in public meetings to nominate 3 candidates for their respective vacancies. The names then went to the commission for consideration. The commission reviewed the application materials for all 3 candidates. The commission also conducted interviews of all candidates. Before proceeding to recommendation, the commission thanks all the candidates for applying to serve in their local district council. For those we do not select for recommendation, we hope you will stay involved with the work of the CCPSA. Is there a motion to recommend to the mayor a candidate to fill the vacancy of the 6th District Council?
I move that the commission recommend that the mayor appoint Dr. Sierra Whitaker to fill the District Council 6th vacancy. Dr. Sierra Whitaker is a 6th District resident living in South Shore. Her commitment to public service and community engagement came from working with South Shore Chamber of Commerce for more than a decade. She is also a member of Hustle Mommies and a board member with several organizations, including the Greater Inglewood Chamber of Commerce and a Black is Gold organization.
There a second?
I second.
Commissioner Terry has moved that to recommend to the mayor to appoint to fill the vacancy of the Sierra Whitaker to fill the vacancy of the 6th District Council, and Commissioner Presley has seconded it. Is there any debate on the motion? Hearing none, we'll now move to a vote. Those in favor of adopting the motion to recommend to the mayor appointment of Sierra Whitaker to fill the vacancy on the 6th District Council, please signify by saying aye. Y'all voting too? Are there any nays? Hearing none, the ayes have it. The motion passes, and we will send the name of Sierra Whitaker to the office of the mayor for Mayor Johnson to consider selecting her to the appointment of the 6th District Council vacancy. Congratulations, Sierra Whitaker. The next order of business is updates. Commissioner Godley will provide the update for the Community Engagement Working Group.
So thanks so much, President Trevor. So we heard a lot of questions about the DNC. So we wanted to provide you with a brief update on what we know. So over the past several weeks, our team has worked closely with CPD to get questions to many of the answers or to many of the questions that you raised. And I want to acknowledge that I appreciate CPD's cooperation towards this end. I also want to extend specific thanks to the district counselors from the 12th and 1st districts, the districts most directly impacted by the DNC, for lifting the concerns of their communities and coordinating with CCPSA and CPD to try to get clarity on these key issues. Here are some of the resources we have put together. So, thank you. Behind me are some QR codes that link you directly to the OEMC site, which provides more information and answers to frequently asked questions. Also, when you walked in, we had a check-in table, and we've put together a DNC resource table there. Included there is a copy of CCPSA's overview of CPD's mass arrest policy, as well as a copy of the OEMC and DNC flyer. If you didn't get this information on the way in, please get it on the way out if you'd like. I'm also happy to talk with anyone after the meeting if you have specific questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Gottlieb. To connect with the CCPSA, please follow us on our social media accounts. I'm about to adjourn the meeting, but as I announced earlier, we are going to have a second meeting that should be immediately following this. However, it's been brought to my attention that we placed it at 7:15 on the public notice, so we cannot start until 7:15. So the regularly scheduled meeting of the CCPSA is now adjourned, and we will reconvene at 7:15 to have a hearing on the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. Yeah, no, I would just, I don't have you look at. Test, test, test. The August 14, 2024 special meeting of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability is called to order at 7:16 p.m. We'll begin by calling the roll to establish a quorum. Commissioner Driver is present, Commissioner Gottlieb, Commissioner Terry, Commissioner Minor, Commissioner Presley, Commissioner Wortham. With all 6 members of the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability present, we have a quorum and can conduct the commission's business. This is a public comment. No, she count up 10. You make sure it's 10. The next item of business is public comment. If you would like to share something related to the commission's work on public safety and accountability, you have a few options. You can speak at a public meeting. You can also submit public comment in writing by emailing your comment to Community Commission Public Comment at cityofchicago.org, or you can bring a copy of your comment to one of the commission's public meetings and give it to someone on the commission or on the commission staff. People who wanted to speak during the public comment period tonight were asked to submit their names in writing earlier tonight. Names were then drawn at random by a member of the commission staff. Speakers will be called in the order in which their names were drawn. If your name is called to offer public comment, we ask that you approach the microphone and line up in the order in which your name is called. When it's your turn to speak, please say your name and then spell your name and then offer your comments. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. We have allotted a total of 20 minutes for public comment. Our first 3 speakers are Madeline Hicks, Reverend Chris Griffin, and Pastor L. Glover.
Amen, amen. My name is Madeline Hicks. I was in a coma and paralyzed for 3.5 months. I was thrown through the windshield of a car, but I made it through, y'all. So I went to go celebrate with some friends. Gunshots. I didn't even know I was hit
because the young man that fell across my lap, his blood ran down my legs. When I tell y'all, see, this is not just about, oh, the police, oh, the politicians, oh, the mayor and all of that. I'm speaking on behalf of my brothers and sisters. What is going on with us, y'all? Well, I'm not gonna say nothing because Ray and them, I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna say something. See, if my little cousin, he found the gun, excuse me, officer, he found his gun, I'm gonna say something. Oh, my brother Pooh, he think he hard because he got all these pistols. I'm gonna say something. Oh, don't say nothing because, you know, you might get hurt. You might get shot. Already been shot. Already been in a coma and paralyzed. Somebody want me here. Come on now, you know that's my Lord and Savior, right? So guess what? It gotta start with me, y'all. Well, let it start with me. Cause God is trying to tell you something. Let it start with me.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Chris Griffin. I'm a member of Soul City Church here in Chicago, and I want to speak on behalf of the ordinance for the Office of Gun Violence Reduction. From an article from Crane's Chicago Business dated October 24th, 2022, neighborhoods such as Garfield Park and Austin during the 2000s already were plagued by poverty, drugs, economic underinvestment, and a home to some of the city's highest homicide rates. Data from the University of Chicago's Crime Lab shows that much of the West Side has fewer healthcare, banking, and grocery options than other parts of the city. But now it's worse. The per capita murder rate in Chicago's police department's 11th district in Austin has climbed to 274% between 2010 and 2020, 115 per 100,000 residents. In the 11th district where I live, serving Garfield Park, the increase was 114% and the per capita murder rate reached 146, according to data from the University of Chicago's Crime Lab. Those homicides rates were up there with the most violent cities on the earth. According to data analytics compiled by Statista, the world's most violent city, Tijuana, Mexico, has a murder rate of only 138 per 100,000 residents. There's been 8 years of frustration. 8 years. We first presented this information for an ordinance to Mayor Rahm Emanuel's administration from 2014 to 2018. It was once again brought during Mayor Lori Lightfoot's administration from 2019 to 2023. And now, Mayor Brandon Johnson's administration to the present. What will be our legacy? Why doesn't Chicago have a 10-year plan yet? While New York City, Los Angeles have made huge strides in reducing gun violence over the past 20 years in their city, President Biden announced an administration implementing an Office of Gun Violence Reduction. Governor Pritzker announced his administration implementing an Office of Gun Violence Reduction. It's time for the alderman and the mayor of the city of Chicago to step up and make every effort to preserve life and protect it for all the citizens of Chicago. Chicago has had an opportunity to be a national leader in gun violence reduction. Instead, our leaders have embraced our title of a second city. It's time for Chicago's Office of Gun Violence Reduction.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pastor Glover, Brother Leslie Glover, L-E-S-L-I-E, Glover, G-L-O-V-E-R. I'm a part of the southeast side of Chicago. I have a church, Global Ministry House of Prayer, 8226 Muskegon. So I'm in the South Shore area. I'm also, and I have to say this, I'm live free every day, 7 days a week. I eat and breathe, live free, because we should all be free, praise God. And also I am honored to be the mother of the executive director of Live Free, Sierra Chamberlain. And in her absence, I stand here for my daughter. And I've worked also for Live Free. I am a trauma specialist, but we're here about the gun violence, the Office of gun violence. I mean, everybody done said basically the same thing. So I had a lot of things written down on the phone. We got 2 minutes, so I'm gonna be transparent with you. The South Shore area, South Side, is traumatized. I'm a trauma specialist. I deal with people outside of the church. That's not a pastor's in the four walls. I'm in the highways and the byways and the most other part of the gutters where they're not centers for people to recover from the gun violence. We need more of everything because people are traumatizing each other over and over and over, and the community cannot heal. And we have to be a part of, we are the voices for the community. And I thank God for being not only to work for Live Free and have the opportunity and the privilege to be able to be a voice for those who don't have a voice. And for those who are traumatized and still trying to recover, I stand in the gap for them today. They need more resources, they need more help, and they're crying out for your help. And it's hard for me to stand here and hold back the tears because I feel their pain every day. And I have lost members in my church, and I have had to speak over their bodies and talk to the family and comfort the family. And still I have to go home and, and try to sleep at night. So I'm asking you to, the cries right now and the bloodshed don't have to, it just don't have to be a consistent bloodshed. We can be the voices to make the difference. The people, when they are one, is power in one, and we are the voices today to stand in solidarity with Live Free.
Thank you. Our next three speakers are David Williams, that was Pastor Glover, right? Okay. Dion McGill, and Mariao Nahara? Mauricio, okay. So first person, David Williams. Oh, that's a you.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Williams, and I was invited here for an organization called Live Free, but also work with an organization called NIAP, National Advocate Youth Program, and also Williams Aftercare Recovery Center, which I'm the founder of. The reason I'm speaking about is expungement programs. That's what a lot of the problems that are going on is that a lot of the youth or individuals in general who have that having over their head, having records. I myself has had a record as well, and I went through the process of going down to 35th Street, pulling my records, going through the process of seeing if I could have what was expunged and sealed. But what holds back a lot of individuals, one, not knowing the process, which Live Free is offering that process too, myself being able to talk about the process of going through it. But that's what a lot of things is holding a lot of youth, individuals who just want to be able to advance and get a better job. They see no difference or no way out because they actually not knowing the process. And then the process allows them to, one, say, hey, I'm doing something better for myself, not having that to actually, one is just being proud. A lot of times they're afraid of even talking about it, being ashamed about it, but you can't be ashamed of something that has been always holding you back. But again, going through organizations like Live Free, going through other organizations that teaches you and tell you how to go get your records clean and then starting a new life. But that's something that definitely needs to be looked into. Thank you very much.
Evening. Dion McGill, 7th Police District Counselor. There were two things I want to comment on. The first one, I want to go back to the July 15th special meeting, and I want to say thank you to Commissioner Gottlieb. Something he said there specifically about COPA and the service that they provide to the community, how we feel about it, and I 100% agreed with those comments. I'm down for anybody who's willing to hold CPD's feet to the fire, because obviously BIA isn't going to do it. And I always remind myself while we're here, because I hear this talk about fair and balanced views to policing. No, we're here because CPD is a broken institution. It was broken before I was born. It's still broken today. Remember, members of that institution could torture 100 people in our communities. Did nothing happened. The ringleader lied about it, did 4 years for perjury, rolled off into the sunset with a pension. And we want to talk about accountability. I haven't forgotten. That's not right. It's not right. I feel bad every time I come here. I feel like I'm angry. Second thing I want to comment is the last meeting you had, Commissioner Wortham made a comment that I felt I would be remiss if I didn't comment on. And that was the idea that the term pretextual stops was inappropriate. And I completely disagree with that. The term is completely appropriate. I live in Inglewood on the Boulevard. Anybody who's in the street sees it every day, right? It's not inappropriate, it's completely appropriate. What's inappropriate is a 700% rise in traffic stops since 2015. 573,313 stops last year. Only 1% that ended in guns or contraband, less than 4% in citation, less than 3% in arrest, which means upward of 92% of those stops result in nothing. But angry residents who I have watched yelling and screaming expletives at officers because they just spent the last 15 minutes getting harassed. Let's call it what it is. That's inappropriate. That's offensive. Not the term, right? The practice. We got to stop trying to do those little dog whistles. It's not the term. Call it what you want. But if it's happening in front of my house every day, that's the problem.
Name is Mauricio Najera, Mauricio. Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. My name is Mauricio Najera, Mauricio. Last name Najera, Najera. I am a peacekeeper. I am one of the leads. Work for a nonprofit organization. And I am a gun violence victim. I got shot about 22 years ago. And still feels like it was yesterday. I am 42 years old. I got shot I was about 21, and it just, to tell you the truth, it's a domino effect to me. That's what I see. You know what I mean? So, we need all the resources for safety. We need a lot of safe zones. And I grew up in the southeast side of Chicago, went to Bowen High School. So you know what I'm talking about. And I just want to see change. That's what made me become a peacekeeper, and I'm always trying to help. And I don't want none of these kids to be going what I've been through. And it's like I said, a domino effect. We need change. Thank you.
Our last three speakers are Myrick Parrott, Monica Gate, and David Johnson.
Hello, how you all doing today? My name is Myrick Parrott. You can spell my name Demetric, Parrott, Parrott. I was speaking up on the behalf of GOD program, and I've been wanting to be a part of them for about 2 years now. I finally got into the program. At first, I was trying to get in on the west side, but I ended up getting in on the south side. But I want to speak up about the job fairs and stuff like that, and extinguishing probation cases and stuff like that. Because I just got out probation, and ever since I got out probation, I've been trying to find a different job. But they always want to look at my old background when I was like 19 and 20 and 18, stuff like that, and talk about what I did wrong with the job, and they gonna be trying to teach me what can I do to get those DNRs and stuff like that fixed so I could be able to go back to work, because I ain't been having to work for a minute. And then I live in the community where we all work at, so it's always violence and stuff going on. And I was just harassed by the police a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, a week ago. It was a week ago. They just pulled up on me talking about they had suspicion I had a gun, but I was just passing from one officer to the other, and I was trying to explain it to him, but he just kept indulging on wanting to be more violent and stuff like that. And I was just trying to speak up on police actually being peacekeepers instead of belligerent people and always hysterical and drastic towards us. Even when you're walking down the street, you can just look up and they just gotta stare at you you're doing something wrong, and you just feel like you're doing something wrong, so you feel like you gotta hide. And I hate feeling like that, like I always gotta hide and stuff like that. It's an odd feeling, you feel me? So I just want to speak up on behalf of that and just say that we just need more resources for working. We need more resources for expunging cases and like helping people find more better paying jobs, so it won't be so much violence, and like help the youth start working earlier. Because I started working when I was 17 years old, and I had to quit because I had to go to school. You know how parents be about grades. You ain't got no grades, can't get no money type of stuff, you know. So it was that. So, you know, I love working. I like working, but that's all I got to say. Got 2 seconds. Y'all have a nice day.
Thank you. That somebody didn't come up. Did Monica come up? There was Demetric, Monica, and David. Did David Johnson come up too?
My name is Monica. I did speak, but
Okay.
I did.
Did
speak
you
already.
submit it too?
I did. I submitted for outside. I thought they said.
No,
Yeah.
I think there's another Monica. I just want to make sure.
Oh,
It might be you, it might be another Monica. Is there another Monica in the audience that filled out one of these slips? Okay. But did David Johnson? He didn't come either, right? Is there a David Johnson in the audience? All right, we'll move on. That concludes our public comment period. We value all of our speakers and thank you for your input. Our next order of business will be our subject matter hearing on establishing the Office of Gun Violence Reduction through ordinance. This meeting is being held in accordance with MCC 2-80-060, which states that upon submission to the commission of a petition signed by at least 2,000 Chicago residents, the commission shall hold a special meeting. On July 19, 2024, the commission received a qualifying petition. Although the commission does not have the power to establish an Office of Gun Violence Reduction, we are always open to hearing the community's ideas regarding public safety in the city. For context and to educate both the commission and the public of the substance of this special meeting, we have invited a representative from the petitioning body to give a summary of why the petition was submitted. We have also assembled a panel of experts who can speak to the subject matter after that introductory statement concludes. There will be questions from commissioners. Before I introduce our panelists, I would like to invite Artinese Myrick of Live Free, Illinois, to the podium to briefly describe what brings us here today.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Hello, everyone, and thank you, Commission. I'm appreciative of your role of making sure that communities are uplifted and the community representation on the panel here today. I am Artinese Myrick, and I'm the Director of Organizing and Policy with Live Free, Illinois. We are a faith-based organization dedicated to ending mass incarceration, gun violence, and police violence in Black and Brown communities. Through our work, we organize over 60 congregations in the city of Chicago and over 120 congregations statewide to develop justice ministries within churches and empower community leaders to become architects of policy change. We're here today as the first organization ever to trigger a hearing through the CCPSA, gathering over 3,000 signatures in just 6 days by mobilizing congregations and community members from every corner of Chicago. We have successfully submitted 2,737 signatures to the CCPSA, demonstrating this urgent need for demand for action. Yeah, we can clap it up for that. Today, I stand before you to emphasize the critical need for a fully funded Office of Gun Violence Reduction in Chicago. This is not merely a proposal, it is a transformative step essential to the safety and well-being of our communities. While our city is no stranger to new strategies, we must now advocate for a long-term sustainable approach to end gun violence by embedding this office into the very foundation of our city through ordinance. Naming that every time there's a personal shift or change in administration, the plan also changes. The city should have a long-term, fully funded strategy to end gun violence. The call for such an office began years ago under Mayor Emanuel's administration, driven by our Faith Coalition's advocacy for real solutions in response to violence in 2016. The advocacy led to a creation of a blueprint for the Office of Gun Violence Reduction in 2018, which was passed down to Mayor Lightfoot. However, the office was never fully funded or operationalized long-term, representing a missed opportunity to make lasting impact. Mayor Johnson has committed to establishing this office and recently praised the Vice President for creating the nation's first Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which he named as a crucial step towards transformation. While we agree with the mayor, Chicago has yet to experience this transformation. Other cities like New York, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Denver, Washington have made substantial investments in their bonds reduction strategies, resulting in meaningful change. Despite our smaller size, Chicago continues to struggle with high rates of homicides with less investment. The proposed Office of Gun Violence Reduction Ordinance would be a linchpin in executing a comprehensive, fully funded, fully staffed strategy. This office would not only focus on essential services like street outreach, victim support, witness protection, and trauma care, but also would prioritize co-governance and oversight. By leveraging the power of city agencies and uplifting grassroots organizations that have long worked without adequate support, this office would ensure that these efforts are sustainable and effective. Co-governance is not just a concept. It is the cornerstone of trust building and ensuring that community solutions are genuinely community-driven. With oversight from a multidisciplinary team like yourselves, including survivors of gun violence, this office would be empowered to re-grant resources to neighborhood-level organizations like GOD, allowing them to expand their crucial work. It would streamline all violence prevention efforts, ensuring that funding and agencies work collaboratively and transparently with a clear evaluation and reporting that is visible to community members like myself. We know that real change takes time. Experts say that it could take up to 10 years to see, feel, and sustain the reduction in violence. Yet Chicago's approach has been inconsistent, often shifting with new administrations, particularly in staffing, and this lack of continuity has cost lives, especially in our Black and brown communities. Gun violence is no longer confined to just the South and West sides. It is a public health crisis affecting every neighborhood in Chicago. And this is why we must commit through ordinance to establishing a fully funded and again, fully staffed Office of Gun Violence Reduction. This is just not about saving lives, it's about transforming our city and ensuring that every neighborhood, family, and child in Chicago can live free from the fear of gun violence in our city. In closing, we need an ordinance to make sure that violence prevention plan cannot be wiped away due to political priorities. And we need clear coordination of government services. We deserve transparency about how violence prevention funds are allocated throughout the city and who it's being funded to. We deserve community oversight and genuine co-governance and power to affect policies that can impact gun legislation, but also gun reduction in the city of Chicago. Again, I'm thankful for all the members of the congregations who have come here tonight, all of our stakeholders, all of our partners, and to our Faith Coalition for taking on such a courageous ask. And again, thank you to the commission for providing this space to advocate for a comprehensive office to reduce gun violence in Chicago.
Thank you, Artinese. Joining us for the panel are Norman Kerr. Norman Kerr founded Trajectory Changing Solutions, a consulting firm specializing in violence prevention and reduction strategies and capacity building. He is an international expert in addressing violence and trauma who has promoted community wellness in various contexts for 30 years. TCS works with cities and municipalities, foundations, law enforcement, and nonprofits to support and elevate local entities best suited to implement proven approaches to reducing violence. Thank you for being here. Also joining us is Reverend Dr. Otis Moss III. He is the senior pastor of Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. Dr. Moss is ordained in the Progressive National Baptist Convention and the United Church of Christ. Dr. Moss is identified by the Baylor University George W. Truett Theological Seminary as one of the 12 most effective preachers in the English language in 2018. He founded the Unashamed Media Group, a justice-centered, faith-based agency committed to producing and curating stories to inspire the heart and challenge the mind. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Moss. And also joining us virtually, I believe. Dan, can you see us? Is Dan Hinkel. He is a longtime Chicago journalist who has specialized in criminal justice reporting over his award-winning career. He has served as a reporter for the Chicago Tribune, the Times of Northwest Indiana, Janesville Gazette, Illinois Answers Project, and currently Injustice Watch. His work has spotlighted official ineptitude and corruption, particularly within law enforcement, and driven changes to policy and leadership in police departments and prosecutors' offices. Thank you for joining us. with that, we'll, we will begin by some opening questions. With the first question being directed to Norman Kerr, which is, can you speak to the history of a city-initiated violence prevention efforts in Chicago?
Good evening. It's good to be with you all. So I joined the Office of Violence Reduction. It started in 2019 under Mayor Lightfoot, and I joined it in September of that year. Prior to that year, funding for what we call CVI work, community violence intervention work, had only been funded for 1 year under the Rahm Emanuel administration. Prior to that, there was no city funds that went to street outreach, violence interruption, none of the work that the peacekeepers are doing or anybody that's doing. So that was very monumental. Like I said, I've been in this work for 30 years. I helped to start Ceasefire, Cure Violence, worked at other organizations, and all the funds were previously through private sources or the state. The city had never funded anything like this. They funded other initiatives like CAPS. But boots on the ground, the city never touched that. More programs like mentoring. Rahm Emanuel funded $30 million for mentoring programs for preteens at a time where we were leading the country. We always lead the country. And I'm not saying that prevention isn't important, but when you think about the levels of violence, you have to go to the population that is the most violent. That's how you reduce violence. We're not talking about reducing violence 5 years from now by working with young kids. That should happen too. But we need to go to the population that's the most violent now. And I use the example of COVID. With COVID, we went directly to the people who were infected. That was the mission. Get to them, vaccinate them, quarantine them, right? So they don't spread it. Did we do prevention as well? Yes, we did PPE distribution. We talked about 6 feet distance, stay home, wear a mask, all those things. But if we didn't get to the population that was infected, we'd be at home right now on Zoom calls having this conversation. So the Lightfoot administration was trailblazing. I gotta give it up, and that's why I joined the team, is because I said, man, we could really do some things that the city has never done before. There was an office that was established, the Office of Violence Reduction, under the Deputy Mayor of Public Safety. We didn't get the traction that we needed because the funds weren't there. Enough funds weren't there. The structure was there and the intentions were good. And what we're seeing, as was mentioned by the young lady, Artinese, is that in other cities, everybody wants to do an Office of Violence Prevention or whatever they call it. It sounds so good to do it. And it makes them feel like they're doing something, but the details are missing. How are we gonna get the money? Who's gonna do it? What's the long-term plan for this? It's like these things don't exist in other places. Even some of the cities that were mentioned, they're struggling because they are vulnerable. A new administration comes in and they have a different focus, guess what? They offer that now, they own something else. So it's important that we have very committed conversations around this. This is not a process that's gonna happen quickly, but we have to be committed and stay at the table because we all love Chicago. And hearing all these people that have been victimized, aren't we over this yet? So we gotta come together and say, what do we need to do? And let's not leave until we figure this out and make it happen. But I have to give credit to the Lightfoot administration. I think the Johnson administration kind of fell in line with some of the things that were already in place. Now we have to take it to another level, no doubt. But let's acknowledge what's been built, because in many cities, they don't have anything like this. Nothing. Groups are calling me, boots on the ground, community-based organizations are calling for help, and they're not going to their cities. So we have a great starting point here. I just think we have to build on it.
Thank you. The next question I will direct to Dan Hinkel, and that is, can you speak to how the city of Chicago currently handles public safety budgeting, particularly when it comes to spending on violence prevention and violence reduction?
Well, I can't cover that necessarily in a completely holistic way, but the police budget is what it is, and that's, obviously generates a, can you hear me, by the way?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good. The thing that I've written a lot about over the last couple of years is how the city has used its the money that it got through the American Rescue Plan Act. The Lightfoot administration put a lot of that into its anti-violence programming under the sort of the parameters of our city, our safety. And I've written a few times about the programs that are, pretty disparate in nature in terms of what they do. Like some of them deal directly with victims of gun violence and things like that. Others, could be in her administration that she defined pretty broadly what would be an anti-gun violence program. And so it included things like planting trees and things like that. One of the stories that I had written related to the city's effort to spend, I think it was $400 million, the bulk of which was American Rescue Plan Act money. And as of the end of last year, that was going out the door pretty slowly, and a lot of the programs are being set up, kind of slowly, and it wasn't clear what they're, eventually when they would get set up. So I guess my answer would be, if you're looking for the city's spending on things that could be considered anti-gun violence, I think a lot of that stuff lives not just under CPD and their budget, but in, other departments such as Department of Family and Sport Services, the health department, places like that. The Chicago Recovery Plan is a good place to look. There's a bunch of documents on the city's website there showing the progress that the city hasn't made in spending the money that it has until they have to allocate the money by the end of this year and spend it by 2026 under the federal rules. So,
Hey, Dan, I just had a follow-up question, and I just wasn't sure if I heard you correctly. You're saying that there was violence prevention money that was allocated to planting trees? Did I understand you correctly?
I wrote a story that was about it was in the Illinois Answers Project, and it was about the Our City, Our Safety plan under the Lightfoot administration. And she had some things that were sort of marketed or promoted as being, anti-gun violence programs. And an example of one of the things that the city defined under that, under that heading was, a program to plant trees, and they were cleaning vacant lots, and there were, some of that money was earmarked anyway to put pickleball courts in the parks. So yeah, it was a fairly broad definition of what anti-violence spending would be.
Thank you. Next opening question I will direct to Pastor Moss, and that is simply, what has been your observations or thoughts about establishing an Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and do you have any context to how it may have worked in other states or cities, and how you think it's applicable to the city of Chicago?
Can you hear me? Okay. The fundamental question is, can Chicago implement the best practices that have been operating all across the nation? Within Richmond, California, they instituted an Office of Prevention about 20 years ago, of interruption in reference to violence. First year was roughly about a 15% reduction, then into a 25, and then 30, and then upward of 70% reduction. Within Baltimore, New York, specifically the Bronx, Miami, Cleveland, Ohio, they have all been implementing some form of violence reduction or prevention in those cities and have seen immediate results. The cost to a city when someone is shot is roughly about $1.6 million. The cost to invest in interruption is roughly about $30,000 to $50,000 per person. 1.6 million for someone who was just shot and injured, or 30,000 to 50,000 for someone to prevent someone from getting killed. The simple economics of this idea makes complete sense. I do not understand why the city of Chicago will not invest in an Office of Gun Violence Reduction and Prevention. it makes complete, utter sense. So let me give a broader context. Police are designed to respond, not to prevent. They are not designed to prevent. That is not the structure of the police. Firemen are not designed to prevent, they respond. Roughly in the 1960s, there was a period within American history where there were a variety of fires that were happening in houses and also in forests. So therefore, they instituted an office of fire prevention. Well, what do? They started teaching young people to stop, drop, and roll. Make sure that you put an extinguisher in your house. How do you handle a grease fire? Then somebody came on TV by the name of Smokey the Bear, and Smokey the Bear said, you can prevent forest fires. An education program started, and then prevention and interruption put in place, and as a result, we saw a major decrease in what? Fires that were happening in homes and also in forests. They were able to save roughly $500 million by investing in $3 to $4 million of education. It makes economic sense. The city of Chicago just needs to follow best practices that are not connected to CPD, but look at it as a public health strategy. When there is a public health strategy, all institutions are involved. If there is a virus that is hitting a city, we don't just call the hospital. We make sure that all institutions are involved to ensure that everyone is safe and is able to thrive. It just makes sense. Let's implement an Office of Gun Violence Prevention and Reduction and save some lives.
Thank you. Thank you, Pastor Moss. I will now open the floor up to commissioners. As you're asking your questions, if you can ask them in succession, I understand that as other commissioners ask questions, that you may have a question to piggyback off of that, but if we can ask the question that you have in order, that'd be helpful. And we'll start with Commissioner Wortham.
All right, good evening. Thank you to all of the panelists for your time this evening. So in my review of a lot of the literature related to this proposal and to Live Free's program in general, I see repeatedly as one of the main tenets, the end of mass incarceration as a focus, or the decrease in the carceral state. And often when we talk about gun violence and violence in the city, we talk about this tension between the realistic need to address root causes and the very realistic need to have immediate solutions for those of us who are suffering violence in our city. And so as it relates to a proposal for an Office of Gun Violence Reduction and these tenets of ending mass incarceration and ending or reducing the carceral state, I'm interested in a response from anyone about how you reconcile those things, because I consider gun violence a violent crime. And I do believe that incarceration is a tool in the immediate for violent offenders. And so I'm wondering what the position of this initiative will be as it relates to the incarceration of violent offenders in coordination with the long-term strategy of addressing root causes and working with those, Mr. Kerr, as you said, who are most involved or impacted by the acts of violence. It's to anyone can answer.
Also, you referenced Live Free, so I don't know if there's somebody from Live Free who would specifically like to speak to that.
Thank you, Commissioner, for your question. I just want to be clear that this office would not be responsible for the holding of the tenets of Live Free Illinois. And so this office has a separate job to do so. At Live Free, we believe in reimagining public safety. We do not believe in arbitrarily throwing people away and locking the key, but we do believe that folks should be accountable and cannot just shoot up our city without impunity. But we do not believe that the current structures are equitable to the people that we serve.
Would anybody else on the panel like to address this?
Yeah.
Pastor Moss.
I would add that when we talk about incarceration, 70% of the people who are incarcerated, whether you're talking in Chicago or nationally, are nonviolent offenders. The second piece is that Chicago has the largest mental health facility in the nation, better known as the Cook County Jail. So we don't have the necessary investment in mental health facilities. We end up placing them in the Cook County Jail. 70% of the people who are incarcerated are nonviolent offenders. Once they are incarcerated, because they do not go before a jury, but usually they plead out in the process because they are dealing with people who are poor who are incarcerated. Once you are incarcerated, you put yourself within a particular cycle that you then can become preyed upon those who want to utilize you for their own economic benefit. In other words, doing dirt on the street. And so as a result of that, you end up creating a cycle where a certain community is injured in the process instead of looking and reimagining new solutions so that we can create a community that thrives, not just survives.
So thank you, Pastor Moss. If I may, though, I want to be clear because that's why I prefaced the question by talking about gun offenders, violent offenders, because I understand that the larger scale conversation about mass incarceration, meaning we do not benefit as a society by overly incarcerating nonviolent offenders. I understand that point. What I'm talking about is the position on violence, on violent offenders and the use of incarceration to immediately stop that bleed. So I appreciate the response, and I do understand that in the larger context of mass incarceration, but my immediate concern, frankly, is again that tension between immediate solutions, long-term solutions, and violent offenders. And I think anyone who's been shot or had a family member murdered would agree that shooting someone and killing them is a violent offense.
I appreciate you clarifying that. In all of the cities that an Office of Gun Violence Prevention was instituted, this is about prevention of violence so that people will not have to watch their loved one be buried in the process. And as a result, they've been able to reduce violence. This does not remove from the books that someone is to be accountable when they harm or shoot an individual. We are specifically talking about strategies to put in place to ensure that we don't raise a generation of people who are harming other people. That's what the office has to do. We want to ensure that we are not raising up, teaching, and pouring into young people so that they feel that the way in which they must function is through violence.
Commissioner Minor.
Thank you. So I kind of want to, excuse me, I want to change gears a little bit and get a little bit more into the background, right? And so I know that a similar ordinance for this office has been passed a few times, right? First in 2019 by Alderman Sawyer, and then it failed in June 2023. And then a similar ordinance called the Office of Neighborhood Safety was enacted by Alderman Taylor, and then it failed in May 2023. So I kind of want to know a little bit more about why the previous ordinance have failed. I also want to know how will Alderman Yancey kind of account in his introduced version, how will it be different from some of those ordinances that failed, and kind of what are the things that we need to be paying attention to when it comes to city council negotiations?
I'll let Artinese answer this, but I don't know if they failed. It's my understanding that they never came up for a vote. But can you speak more to that? Is that correct?
You're absolutely right, Commissioner Driver. It never came to a vote due to political priorities, which is another reason why we're pushing for an ordinance. A mayoral election happened. So that made a lot of alders have different priorities. I'd also like to say that during our hearing for public safety, there was also a hearing for the Oath Keepers. And I will also say members of the CSCC had spoke at our hearing that also pushed back for us to actually have a real chance to advocate. So aldermen at the time did not even get to hear about what this office could do or would do. So again, many attempts and political priorities were what made barriers occur. Pastor Beth Brown is also a member of our Faith Coalition and can speak to the trajectory of how these ordinances have ran into barriers.
Thank you. And thank you all for your service. It's good to see you up there. Yeah, I will add to what Artinese said in terms of political will. And I think we cannot overstate what happens when a change in administration happens and when the going back and forth between mayor and alders begin to happen. And so alders who want to go with the mayor on things then don't want to do something that's going to go against the mayor. And so if the mayor doesn't support, then it's very difficult, as you all know, to get an ordinance passed. We know that from the ECPS struggle. There has to be political will for it. And I think one of the things that happened at we were fortunate, the ordinance was called for a subject matter hearing before the Public Safety Committee. Unfortunately, they did have the Oath Keeper hearing before it that lasted close to 3 hours. So most people had gone by the time we came up. But also, at the very last minute, the mayor at the time, not Mayor Johnson, had Allison Arwady, the head of the Public Health Department, come and talk about why gun violence reduction needed to stay solely under the Department of Public Health. And, she went on. And that was unfortunate. And so I think part of the obstacles that we have faced have just been really getting a fair hearing, but also misunderstanding. We're not saying that, Pastor Moss spoke to it. Absolutely, it's a public health issue and absolutely needs a public health response. We don't need a public health director trying to figure out how to do gun violence reduction. It's not her area of expertise. And so what we're calling for is an office where people with expertise, we have had in the Office of Gun Violence Prevention, Reduction, Community Safety, we went from Walter Katz to Susan Lee, Norm Kerr was in there for part of that time, to John O'Malley, to Elena Gottrich, to now Gary and Gatewood. And that's only in 5 years. And so, again, part of what we're trying to get to is having a long-term established strategy. Our Faith Coalition, every spring, we have meetings and we all take a deep breath and we say, when are we going to hear about the summer violence plan? And every year, it's sort of like Charlie Brown in the football. Every year, we think there's going to be a great strategy for summer violence. And there never is. And part of that is we don't have an office with expertise that is going to work with community groups and all of the groups working on this. There are a lot of people doing violence prevention, interruption, and reduction in the city of Chicago. We've heard from so many of all across the city. There has to be somebody that is coordinating the strategy across the years, across agencies. And that's really what we're after.
Commissioner,
Thank you.
you done? Commissioner Gottlieb.
So thanks so much for that. So a question I have is about the money and how you would intend to spend it, right? So by my calculations, given kind of the percent of the corporate budget that you're asking for, which is like 1.5%, it would be about $86 million or so, assuming the same budget as now. So how much of that might go directly to these sort of community violence programs versus how much of it is going to go to coordination? I guess I'm just trying to figure out how much of this is about making sure that existing things are coordinated well versus how much is about providing new resources to these.
Who's your question addressed to?
I guess it might be best directed. Oh, it might be best directed to, I guess, the Live Free folks potentially, just given that this is their proposal. But
I'm going to pass it to our Faith Coalition. Again, Pastor Beth Brown.
I am not the Faith Coalition. Thank you. So actually, we would love for it to be more than 1.5 of the corporate budget. I think initially we were asking for 100 million, knowing that there is 85 million that's kind of rolled over. I think one of the hopes for this is that because there would be an office or a department, whatever you want to call it, that would oversee all of this, that some of the separate offices that exist all around the city would be able to be consolidated. Not that the work would stop, but that we'd be brought under one roof, so to speak. And so oversight would be a lot less ideally. So instead of having a separate community safety coordination center, a separate public health, a separate victim services over here, and a separate, that everybody could be in one space, one building, potentially share some staff, share some equipment. So hopefully some of the money would be saved in that way. I think, you know, money is always going to be the issue. I think one of our fears and one of our hopes, if I could name it that way, is, and I would love for Dan to say something about this too, because Dan knows a lot about the money and how hard it is to find the money. Right now, CVI is mostly being funded, and I mean the big CVI that's happening, is mostly funded by foundations and business people, right? Civic people who are concerned. We are at the whim of where the wind blows foundations and civic people in the city of Chicago. If we don't start funding and increasing funding rapidly for public safety, we are going to be in trouble as a city. And so our hope would be that CVI funding could come under this office and this fund so that it's permanent. We don't want foundations to decide year after year how much money they're willing to give to CVI. I mean, we love the foundations. So let me say, we love the foundations. We love that they contribute, and we need permanent funding. And until Chicago gets serious about long-term and permanent funding, you know, who knows where the wind's going to blow.
Thank you. I have a question for clarity, and anybody on the panel. I assume, Mr. Kerr, you might be best positioned to answer this. So this is titled the Office of Gun Violence Reduction or Prevention. And there has been offices like that under mayors, but it sounds like I'm hearing you all say you want a separate department. And so can anybody on the panel, and I'll also, Dan, if you have something to add about the budget, because she did address you, but can anybody speak to the difference this would make if it was not under the mayor's office or CSCC, if it was something separate?
I think what it needs to be, it needs to be a department within the mayor's office. Because the office doesn't have the stability. The Office of Violence Reduction, which I led, we didn't have grant-making ability, so we couldn't fund organizations. We had to partner with Department of Public Health, we had to partner with DFSS to get funding out. And this is a similar model that we're seeing nationally as well, but it just slows the process down tremendously. To go through the whole RFP process with another department, it's really slow. So we need, in the city of Chicago, we need a department that's focused on this, and that's gonna really improve the longevity of this work, right? Because if you have it as an office, I mean, we're talking about offices, I can say we've had an office since 2019, but your definition of an office is different, right? So we have to be clear about the definition of an office, because for some it means permanency, and some it means an office during this administration. And I think we've been fortunate that the current mayor and the past mayor are aligned on the fact that we need some sort of work to address violence, but the next mayor could say, you know what, I'm not really invested in that if there's not permanency.
So go ahead, I'll follow up after.
No, I was just going to add, in terms of thinking about budget and allocation, budgets are moral documents. And I say that they're moral documents to say that what our priorities are. So you look at a budget to determine what a household's priorities will be. You look at a budget in a hospital to determine what the hospital's priorities will be. And we look at a city to see what the city's priorities should be. If our children are our priority, and if we are tired of going to funerals and watching people die. We need to invest in the future. It is a moral document. I'm just putting that out as a framework, just to say, let's think morally in terms of how our budgets are structured.
Did you have anything, Dan?
I could speak just briefly to what Pastor Brown brought up, which is, she had mentioned CVI work being funded through the city. And I know that as part of my reporting on the American Rescue Plan Act spending with Casey Toner at Illinois Answers Project, we had written about I think it was 16 million out of the 400 million that was going to anti-violence programs, or what the Lightfoot administration considered anti-violence programs, was going to CVI groups, and that was part of a sort of a bigger pot of governmental money that had started flowing there. Again, obviously that money is poised to go away in 2024, so the question of whether to replace it comes up. And to the point about how the money is spread around disparately throughout the city, I recently wrote with my colleague Kelly Garcia at Injustice Watch about a program that is also funded by that same pot of money, the Rescue Plan Act, that was supposed to be delivering diversion services to kids who get arrested by the Chicago Police Department. And we had found that the city was only serving a fraction of the kids that it had aspired to serve. And that, to illustrate the way that the money is really spread around, that's a DFSS CPD, mostly DFSS program. So it's not, there's money going to all these different places included there.
Thank you. Commissioner Presley.
Again, I just want to thank you guys for being here this evening. But I do have a question because I want to better understand. I know that there are a number of jurisdictions who have offices of gun violence prevention or reduction, and I wanted to know specifically what has been successful and what takeaways would we take from those offices that has been successful that we need to be thinking about, that we need to consider if Chicago were to have such an office?
So the immediate thing that works is going directly to the population that's violent. So establishing peacekeepers, street outreach workers, violence interrupters that are going directly to the incidents, mediating those incidents, and supporting those individuals, whether they're returning home or they live in a community, but going directly to that population, again, just like we would address COVID. Now, the thing is, we struggle with ample resources in many of these areas. So you're working with individuals and they say, yeah, you know what? I'm yours. I'm ready, right? What do you have for me? We can't really deliver the amount of jobs that we need, even the amount of mental health providers that we need, because many of them will not go to some provider that they see like somebody they see on TV. They have to look like them, be from the neighborhoods, and understand them. So there's a lot of nuances that we have to really be thoughtful about when we're implementing a program, and we see this struggle around the country. People get funds, they're not sure what to do. That's my job. I help them decide what to do. Because here they are with money, ARP money or whatever it is, and they're clueless. Most cities give this money that's for CVI. This is specifically to work with the highest risk. They give it to programs that are doing chess programs. They're doing after-school programs with little kids. And it's like later on, somebody's coming at them like, what did you do with the money? So the accountability is missing up front. Again, I will continue to say, the Office of Violence Reduction, we funded street outreach. Was it at the level that we needed it to be? No. Now in Chicago, they talk about this 21,000 that are like the highest risk, right? 21,000 people. These are people that are on somebody's radar. There's probably an additional 60 or 80,000, I would imagine, that are on nobody's radar, that are violent. The programs collectively in Chicago work with about 3,000 of the 21,000. One of the reasons why we aren't seeing reductions on a citywide level is because we haven't hit a tipping point with working with this 21,000. So we need to ramp this up. More workers. The GOD program needs to be bigger. Other programs needs to be bigger. Until we get to that point, the great strategies that are being done right now are overshadowed by the fact that we're not seeing the reductions. Because there's some great programs now, and I tell you what, Chicago leads the country in homicides annually, but we lead the country in strategies as well. We really do. But the issue is we're not at a tipping point where we're going to see those reductions because we're only working with 3,000 out of the 21,000. When we get to 18,000, we'll start seeing more drops. Again, I look at this as we're addressing COVID. If we're only working with 3,000 of 21,000 infected people, how do you think that would turn out? So prioritizing, we have to reset our priorities, right? And you alluded to it. When we were addressing COVID, everybody was at the table. Churches were definitely at the table. Schools, the libraries, every community-based organizations. With violence, it's relegated to law enforcement and maybe if you got a street outreach program. All these other entities don't feel compelled to participate. I'm speaking generally. In some communities, you see it looks different. But overall, all the city departments aren't addressing this. So we have to prioritize this. We could use the way we address COVID as a model and say, everybody at the table, we all got a role in this. We all should own this because COVID didn't relegate it to public health professionals and medical people. How do you think that would turn out?
In addition to what Mr. Kerr said, I have had the pleasure of working with mothers groups, aunties groups, if you will, uncles groups, individuals who form nonprofit organizations because of their experience with gun violence. GOD is one of them. And what I see is mothers and uncles and aunties who look like me, creating and filling the gaps in their neighborhood. And when I talk to people about clearance rates and how homicide investigations and how services actually touch them at their front door, they go to those individuals. And those individuals are doing this work with paper clips and bubble gum and out of their own pockets. And so what I've seen and talked to individuals from other offices like New Orleans and Philadelphia, these offices have procurement power to make sure they re-grant to the organizations that people actually trust. And if the Office of Gun Violence Reduction is enacted through ordinance, the city will be able to back those individuals who are actually the foundation of our city. It will be able to stand up the strengths that already exist. We don't have to create anything new. We need to support the people who are actually doing it on the ground. I would also like to pass it to Pastor Moss because I believe he has more information about how this has impacted other cities as well.
Thank you. I'll use the example again of Richmond, California. And I know this intimately because my uncle was a police officer in Richmond. He shared with me that they were struggling with a higher homicide rate proportionally than Chicago had ever witnessed. Much smaller city. What they decided to do was, as Artinese has already stated, they raised the level of funding for community groups. Then they hired people who were in the trenches to be the coordinators for the intervention programs. And that became the difference, that they had the money, they had the coordination, but it was not solely for the police department. It was all hands on deck that we want to invest in the future of our city. So it was education, it was the libraries, it was churches, it was businesses had to make sure that they had summer programs and internships for young people during the summer. It was all hands on deck. So that approach becomes incredibly effective when we take that approach. Cleveland, Ohio, takes the approach of making sure that the data that they had in reference to violence was not solely coming from the police. They made sure that the data was coming from a third party to be able to check to see if the police data was accurate in reference to what was happening in the community, because there was no political stake for Case Western Reserve in reference to what was happening in the city versus the Cleveland Police Department. So my point is that there are all of these wonderful best practices. Let's sit down with New Orleans. Let's sit down with Philadelphia. Let's sit down with Richmond and the Bronx. The Bronx is doing some great work just as a borough in New York. They're doing tremendous work of reducing violence. I want to say this, and Father Mike will back me up. We are tired. Pastor Beth will back me up. We are tired. We are tired of doing funerals. We are tired of seeing people die. We are tired of seeing lives completely obliterated. And there is a way to do this. And here is the thing that for me personally, that just drives me crazy. It's not expensive. It's not expensive. It's expensive when someone dies because the scar never leaves. It is truly expensive. But for a small portion of allocation and the budget, because they are moral documents, we can see a new generation thrive.
So when you talk about cost, and I'm going back to my COVID example, over 4 years, the U.S. spent $14 trillion in addressing COVID. I doubt at the beginning of the pandemic, they said, you know what, let's allocate 14 trillion. They probably said, oh, let's just put 50 million. And a few months later, add another 20, another 50, or whatever. And it totaled up to be 14 trillion. But the point is, it costs what it costs. It costs what it costs. If we're really trying to get rid of it, why should we limit ourselves and say, oh, just put 500 million, that's it. Don't come back for anything else. That's what we usually hear, is make it work with this. How about we find out what it takes to do it, and we focus on that. Like, that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Commissioner Wortham.
Hello? Okay. As it relates to violence interrupters, and this is for anyone on the panel, my understanding, I think, and someone just said this, was the value is their proximity to the trenches, I think was what someone just said. In terms of if this is going to be a city-funded department or office, and in our time of transparency, how does the report back or report up work when a violence interrupter who is in the trenches, I presume that means close to the proximity of violence or crime, how does the transparency mechanism work in this vision in terms of what's being done, and also establishing the efficacy of the violence interruption work?
So there's a whole structure. Like, this is not just a bunch of workers just running out and doing their thing. This is like a structure like a corporation. There's managers, there's supervisors, there's reports that are being done monthly. We're looking at the data, what's working, do we need to change things? Are we working the times that we're supposed to work that coincide when violence occurs? It's a whole thing. This is a technology that's been around the country that most programs are operating this way. So it's not just arbitrary, we feel like working this time of day. No, we know that the times that violence takes place in Chicago are during the evenings, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, overnight. We know that. And our workers are working that. Over the summer, they're working 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. Sometimes they're working longer than that, depending on what the data says in that specific district. So I want you all to know that this is not just some fly-by-night thing that we say, oh, just get a bunch of guys with a basketball, go work with kids on the street. No, it's very organized. They get training. We look at data, and we use that to really figure out when we need to be where. So we look at where does violence take place, and not old data. A lot of times we look at some neighborhoods and be like, oh, clearly that's the problem spot. That hasn't been a problem spot for 20 years. What does the data say right now? So this is very fluid. So there's a Chicago violence reduction dashboard that's on the city's website that will give you information on your community. It's CPD data, to your point, but it will give you information with a 48-hour turnaround time, right? So this is something that didn't exist before. We're getting information that's 2 weeks old. Now it's 48 hours behind, which is very groundbreaking. So this is a site that you can go on. It's public facing. A lot of teams are already using it to determine what does it look like in their specific communities. You can break it down by geographic area, by ward, by district, whatever, but the Chicago Violence Reduction Dashboard, that's something that can help you all see the data that's in your areas.
Add to that, can I add one thing?
We're running a little short on time, so we're gonna get Commissioner Terry's questions, and then we're gonna get ready to close.
Thank you all for being here. I have quick few questions. The first question I have, Beth, you probably can speak to this, you are Artinese. It really deals with what has been the conversation with the current administration related to this particular topic. And not only the administration, because I think it does need to be a coordinated effort considering we do have the epidemiologists and things of that nature with the public health department. So what has all of those conversations been related to this topic from the current administration, the existing epidemiologists that exist within the city of Chicago, the public health department, and yeah, those are all the people I have right now. So can you give us any insight?
I can try. So when Mayor Johnson was running for mayor, we met with him and he expressed support for having a permanent and funded Office for Gun Violence Reduction. We met with him after he was in office and he still expressed support. We had a meeting with Gary and Gatewood, and I'm not sure if I would say he expressed support. His main question was, why do we need it when we have it? It's just been established because Mayor Johnson, if you remember by executive order, established an office when he came into office. It's not a permanent office, it's just the office while he's the mayor, right? So that's the issue, is that unless it's by ordinance, it's never gonna be permanent. So then they spent months coming up with their public safety plan, and we approached Garen Gatewood and said, we're a little surprised that we're not in this conversation around your safety plan. And he said, oh, don't worry, we're saving you for phase 2. I don't think any of us have been contacted to date about phase 2. And so part of the frustration on our part has been, it isn't enough to say, don't worry, everything's in place. If you go to the website for the Office of Public Safety right now, Office of Community Safety, I think it is. If you look, one of the cornerstones is they really want to address root causes. And absolutely that is critical. And there isn't anything about a citywide, because it does have to be citywide, even if some areas are heavily impacted, more so than every other area, it has to be a citywide strategy. There's nothing about the violence reduction strategy. Now, separately, if you meet with all the CVI groups and the people who are funding them, you might hear some things about strategy. But again, it's, yeah, I should stop there because we're short on time. And I think Father Flager said at the press conference that the mayor has reached out to us and is going to meet with us on September 7th about this ordinance and establishing the office. So I think we have hope that he's going to be supportive of this, because honestly, for him, it would be a huge win, because it would be a huge win for the city of Chicago. So we're hoping that's the case.
Thank you. So another quick question for Mr. Kerr and Pastor or Dr. Moss. This question deals with addressing what has worked, because we've heard a lot of things, but I'm speaking specifically like what sorts of programs, initiatives have you seen work, and what does that look like? Do I come in, I get training, or I get access to housing? What does this structure look like that you've seen the success to get us to the results we're looking for?
It's all over the map. Some cities have invested specifically in interruption mentoring programs. Others have taken a position by strengthening education, community engagement with interrupting programs. Others, for example, Baltimore is utilizing connection with youth programs, community engagement, along with the police. It literally is all over the map. Every violence intervention program that has coordination along with trusted partners, there's always reduction. Coordinators with trusted partners, I have to say that. Not just, hey, anybody want to start a violence interruption program? No. There's usually a track record in every city of organizations that have been doing the work 20, 25, 30 years. They have just been doing this work, and they're pulling those pieces in. And so those are usually the programs that end up working. But literally, when I say it's all over the map, it is all over the map depending upon what region you're in. Seattle's using something completely different than Portland. Like I said, Richmond. Los Angeles is using something that's completely different than what you will see in Philly. And the Bronx is completely different than what you will see in Miami. It is all over the map. But the beautiful thing is, Chicago has the opportunity to take the best practices across the nation, and we can implement those best practices and be a model of how to do this. And I think that is the opportunity that we really have at this point.
So in addition to what Dr. Moss mentioned, we have to remember the underlying thing here is going to the population that's the highest risk. Every city that he mentioned is focused on the highest risk. They're doing other programs as well for younger kids and so forth, but they're not neglecting working with the highest risk. And then the critical thing is consistency. What we've seen in Chicago, for those of you who've been paying attention to this for the last 20 years, every year, with the state fiscal year, we would shut down these programs from June 30th to sometimes October. We lost a lot of workers. They were going into other fields, go work at a factory because it's more stable. Some people would just volunteer their time and wait to come back, but it was an inconvenience. We're trying to legitimize this work, and it's got to be comparable to other industries where you're getting benefits and all these different things, right? So this is part of the longevity, is that we have to make it a real job. But we need consistency. We cannot reduce violence if we're not consistent. We start a program, it's great, and then it stops for whatever reason, right? Personnel changes, philosophy changes, right? All of it, we need consistency. So this proposal about this office being permanent, the boots on the ground work has to be permanent too. Everybody thinks that, oh, we could just, yes, let's just do it for a year and then, we'll go. No, this is a permanent job now. Like we have police, like we have teachers, boots on the ground, street outreach workers, permanent jobs. They're not going away. They shouldn't go away.
Thank you. And my last quick question is for you, Mr. Hinkel. I just want to know, what role do you believe media plays in highlighting the need for things of this nature, as we often see the other side of highlighting the violence that's happening in these communities, but not necessarily speaking to the solutions or the need for solutions, or even more highlighting of those more heavily than the bad stuff who are trying to resolve these issues?
I appreciate that question. And yeah, I'm here as a journalist and not an advocate with, a dog in the fight in any direction. But I'll say that obviously the work that I've done speaks to the fact that I think that it's important to cover the things that to hold the city accountable for the money that it's spending and the effort that it's making to try to, impact this problem. Like I sometimes I feel a little bit lonely in terms of the Chicago media sphere in terms of doing that. I should say there are others who do it also, but I think it's really important, and I wish, more people would write about it and more people would pay attention to it.
Thank you. So we have now reached the conclusion of our, actually, I do have another question and comment. And I also know Commissioner Wortham asked to make a remark as well. Admittedly, I'm not exactly objective here, and I want to be clear also that I'm speaking on behalf of myself, not on behalf of the commission, as I do currently hold the title of president of CCPSA. I'm not speaking on behalf of the CCPSA. I'm speaking on behalf of Commissioner Driver. I would like to thank everybody in the audience who came and offered public comment. The folks who are here on this panel. This is something that means a lot to me. I'm a person who's experienced a lot of gun violence in my life. That is the driving force behind why I'm currently in this position today. This is not exactly fun work or something that I wake up thinking that this is the best job in the world. But for me, I think it's absolutely critical that I ensure that people coming behind me don't have to go through what I went through. And so with that, I, as an individual, as a commissioner, but not on behalf of the CCPSA, fully endorse and support unequivocally establishing an Office of Gun Violence Reduction. And via ordinance, and the question that I have, which is my last question before passing it to Commissioner Wortham, is how do we win? And that's to anybody. When I say win, I mean how do we get this ordinance passed?
As I said before, we have to stay at the table and work it out. Because if we're walking away and this is not resolved, come on, what are we doing? So I know it's tedious, but we have to stay at the table and continue this conversation. We have to be committed to it. I mean, the world is watching. Come on. Like, are we tired of leading the country in homicides every year? When was the last time we didn't lead in homicides? Nobody can tell me. We should be sick of it. Sick of traveling around the country or abroad, and when they hear you from Chicago, this is what they talk about. We got to stay at the table. Even, we may not like what we're hearing from the other side, but we have to work through it. We owe it to our families, we owe it to our kids, we owe it to our communities.
I agree with Mr. Kerr. We have to stay consistent. We have to be open-minded. We can't be swayed due to political priorities. And we have to be able to leverage the full city's power through every agency, through every community. We have to be able to make this happen. I charge us by also talking to our alders because they should be a part of this conversation too. And we have reached out to them. And they have decisions and votes that matter that can very much determine if this office happens or not. So I encourage everyone in this room to talk to their aldermen about supporting an Office of Gun Violence Prevention. I also encourage everyone in this room to continue to come back to meetings like this where community's input is really valued. And without community input and talking to our aldermen and making sure that we're all on the same page, we can't make a bet that political priorities won't win. So I say we win by continuing to use our voices in the city agencies that matter and by pulling everyone together. What I see right now is a lot of puzzle pieces all over the city. They can make one picture, but they're scattered. And so what I see is us being able to pull together a full picture that can get rid of the global notion that we hear about Chicago, and that we can truly pull together the city where, again, the city agencies reflect me, the people that I serve, the congregations that we work with, and the blocks that we know are truly impacted. And that doesn't happen without talking to our aldermen and exercising our civic right as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Wortham.
Hello. All right, thank you. So I'm gonna put this under miscellaneous or I don't know, not new business, but I take very seriously our charge to increase public safety as a portion of our work here. And District Councilor McGill made a statement in public comment that I do feel the need to respond to because it misquoted me and it relates specifically to the totality of our city using every tool possible to increase public safety. So at our July 25th meeting, I did make a statement regarding pretextual stops, but not in isolation as was indicated by District Councilor McGill. What I said was President Driver announced that we received petitions to have a hearing on pretextual traffic stops. I expressed an opinion that I thought it was inappropriate for us as a commission to title a hearing on pretextual traffic stops, as pretextual is a legal conclusion. I think it is very important for us to have hearings to explore issues related to public safety in any way. I've discussed this with CCPSA staff, pardon me. I understand staff's position as it relates to the interpretation of the ordinance and why we are titling the hearing in the way that we did. I did not in isolation say pretextual stops is an inappropriate term. And so I'll stand by anything I say in any of these meetings always, but I do take issue with being misquoted or quoted out of context because I think it's very important that everything that each of us say, it relates to our long-term mission of acting out our responsibilities per ordinance. And I wanted to clarify that because that is what I said. I take issue with titling it with a legal conclusion when it really should be a hearing to explore the totality of the issue. And I want to clarify that because it's important for me to have my record clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, comments, concerns from commissioners or panelists before I adjourn the meeting? With there being no further business before the CCPSA, this meeting is now adjourned, everyone.